Welcome to this new automotive news video for Wednesday, April 22, 2026. And today we're going to talk a lot about Chinese brands. Now, I know that many people here swear only by French, German, Italian, or Japanese cars. And I agree with you. These nations have produced some truly incredible cars for decades. Except now, with the rise of electric and electrified cars in general, there's a new competitor that's taking over everything, and that's obviously China. There have been a whole bunch of news stories in the past 24 hours that clearly show their technological superiority. We'll discuss several brands that recently announced new battery technologies with much faster charging times than European brands offer. We're discussing batteries that recharge in under 5 minutes. On the same day, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association released first quarter 2026 car market figures, clearly showing only Chinese brands are doing well. It seems we'll have to get used to them. We'll probably have to get used to the fact that in the coming years, in the coming decades, they will replace some of the European brands. So today, there's quite a bit of news related to Chinese brands. It will most likely be different tomorrow. In the meantime, I hope you'll find this video interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and leaving a comment where you share your opinion about today's news. And by answering the following question: would you be willing to trust Chinese brands if they continue to prove their technological superiority compared to European brands? So let's start with a few numbers before we really talk about news concerning certain brands and also about the incredible Chinese battery technologies. In March 2026, Chinese brands made significant progress in Europe, up 97%, compared to March 2025 in a market that is overall growing by 11%. They really stand out above the rest. Their combined market share, meaning all the Chinese brands together, accounted for almost 10%. For Europe, that's a lot considering that 2 or 3 years ago, most of them didn't even exist here. So, in total, they've sold almost 150,000 units. As for Chinese brands, sales of plug-in hybrid vehicles have quadrupled during this period compared to 2025. Still in Europe, right, we're not talking about the Chinese market. Plug-in hybrids from Chinese brands accounted for about 47,000 registrations, and 4 Chinese models are in the top 10 for plug-in hybrid sales in Europe. On the electric car side, about 46,000 units were registered. And here too, there's a clear increase. That's up 107% compared to March 2025. And it's probably not going to stop anytime soon if we believe the various announcements made by different Chinese manufacturers yesterday. For example, at BYD, which is probably the best established brand in Europe. For the past few weeks, BYD has been promoting one of its new batteries, the Blade 2.0. It's a battery that sometimes allows for 1,000 kilometer of range on the best vehicles. But above all, it allows for absolutely incredible charging speeds, since it's compatible with BYD's flash charging system, which accepts up to 1,500 kWh of peak charging. For now, this battery was mainly available on models from the Denza brand, which belongs to BYD and is their somewhat premium brand. But BYD has just confirmed that in Europe, they will add this type of battery to their entry-level model, the BYD ATO3. You'll need some patience since, as usual, it will arrive in China before it reaches Europe. But here, we're talking about a vehicle probably sold for around 35,000 euros on the European market, not necessarily with the biggest batteries, since we're talking about 55 and 68 kW batteries, so probably around 500 km of range at most. However, with flash charging, its battery can recharge from 10 to 70% in 5 minutes. And here, very clearly, even if we take the very high-end European models, the latest electric BMWs or Mercedes that have just been unveiled, we don't have comparable charging times at all. The latest model that was announced a few days ago at Mercedes claims a charging speed of about 330 kWh, which allows you to recover about 320 km of WLTP range in 10 minutes. So that's twice as long as what the ATO3 should allow. And even at BMW, the latest i3 claims 900 kilometers of range, so that's way ahead. But here too, in terms of charging speed, we're looking at 350 kWh, which should give about 350 kilometers of range in 10 minutes. That's better than at Mercedes. But compared to the ATO3, it's not that good. While these new versions of the ATO3 will probably sell for a third to a half of what a high-end electric Mercedes or BMW costs. But that's not the craziest announcement made in the last few hours because over at CATL, the huge battery manufacturer, let's remember that CATL alone represents about 50% of the global market, meaning that 1 out of every 2 electric car batteries sold in the world is a CATL battery, for the simple reason that CATL completely dominates almost all other brands technologically. And precisely, CATL has just unveiled its latest battery, which boasts absolutely mind-blowing charging times, incomparable to what we have in Europe. And even in terms of range, it's pretty mind-blowing. CATL has unveiled its 3rd-generation Shenzhen batteries here. Batteries that, theoretically, would be large enough to promise ranges of over 1,000 kilometers. We're talking about 1,500 here, according to the figures provided by CATL. But we know that the Chinese homologation cycle is particularly generous with range estimates. You'd probably have to take off 20% if they were tested under the WLTP cycle. Still, even if it was rated at only 1,000 kilometers under WLTP, it would still be way ahead of the competition. And that's not even the craziest part of this story. Wait until I tell you about the charging times, because CATL claims it can charge from 10 to 35% in 1 minute. So basically, you can get back about 300 kilometers in just 1 minute. The more traditional 10 to 80% charging test most manufacturers use is completed here in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So here, it's almost comparable to the time it takes to fill up a gasoline car. Between the moment you insert your credit card and the moment you take it back, it probably takes about 2 minutes. Here, we're talking about 3 minutes and 40 seconds to get back about 800 to 900 kilometers CLTC. And a 10 to 98% battery recharge, so almost 1,500 kilometers CLTC done in 6 minutes. On the durability side, CATL announced that after 1,000 ultra-fast charging cycles, the battery's state of health was still at 90%. That means, technically, the battery is still capable of 90% of its capacity. And for your information, this battery is also compatible with a new system patented by CATL that preheats the battery when it's cold before charging it, so you can also enjoy ultra-fast charging times in winter. Without exaggerating, if this comes to the European market, it would almost instantly make all other electric cars obsolete. So the good news for us is that our European politicians are so far behind when it comes to electric cars that for now, they're still subsidizing the installation of charging stations with an average power of around 150 to 350 kilowatts. So even if you have a battery that supports 1,000 kilowatt charging, if the station only delivers 300, you'll be limited to 300. Still, if tomorrow charging station operators start installing very high-powered stations, 700, 800, 1,000 kilowatt or more on our highways, then very clearly, the European competition will be outpaced in no time at all. In a way, for now, European brands can thank the slowness of the public authorities, especially since in a few months, Chinese competition will get even stronger in Europe with the arrival of a new brand that's still unknown here, GWM, which is very well known in China. It's the acronym for the brand Great Wall Motors, which wants to launch nearly 10 different models in Europe over the next 2 years. Unlike what GWM wanted to do a few years ago, since we've known since 2022 that this brand is interested in the European market, they won't just focus on fully electric models. Even though the acceleration of electric car sales in Europe is clear, they think focusing only on fully electric vehicles right now is like shooting themselves in the foot. That's why they want to offer both electric vehicles and plug-in, hybrid, or combustion engine vehicles in Europe. The first one to be launched is the Aura 5, which has a somewhat failed Porsche-like front, but it will probably be GWM's entry-level model. It's a small compact car. This car will then be followed by the Yolian Max SUV, as well as the H7. GWM is somewhat forced to enter the European market because, like many other Chinese brands such as BYD or even Chery, which you might know and is represented in Europe by the brands Omoda and JQ, there is currently a purge happening in the Chinese market. There are a lot fewer cars being sold this year than last year, for example, because of the end of subsidies for the electric vehicle industry. There are a lot fewer sales. The brands have to share a much smaller market, and that's why many of them are turning to foreign markets like Europe, because they ultimately see their own future there, which is still quite surprising. So we have Chinese brands arriving in Europe. And on the other hand, we'll finish with this. We have European brands that used to be present in China, which are finding it increasingly difficult to stay there. The most recent one is Audi. And indeed, Audi, remember, they created a new brand also called Audi in China, but it doesn't have the same logo. Instead of having 4 rings, we have 4 letters, AUDI in capital letters. Audi did this to try to soften its image as a foreign brand, but also to reassure the Chinese market by showing them that this brand was made especially for them. For that, and it's mandatory in China, they partnered with a local manufacturer, SAIC, and together they launched the E5 Sportback some time ago. Remember, we talked about it at the time because Audi was announcing really impressive orders. They announced 10,000 orders in just 30 minutes for this first special Audi model. So we thought Audi would be saved and that it would manage to regain quite a bit of market share thanks to this model. The reality is, absolutely not, because in the end, only 7,000 units were delivered throughout the entire year 2025, which suggests that some of the pre-orders were eventually canceled. A pace that slowed down even more at the beginning of 2026 since Audi only registered 420 in January with a small rebound in March. 2,600 units thanks to big promotions. I mentioned it to you in a video. Audi announced a 30% discount on some of its models. And despite that, for now, the momentum is still struggling to build. But Audi in all caps is not giving up just yet. We know that in a few months, they will be adding a second model to the lineup, the Audi E7X, which will be an SUV, maybe a bit more mainstream compared to the E5 Sportback, which was a sedan. Then, in a few months, in 2027, a third model that hasn't been revealed yet. We'll see if that helps Audi get back on track. In the meantime, that's it for today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If that's the case, as usual, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, and maybe even supporting the channel by clicking the join button below. I'll see you tomorrow for the next video. Bye.